Biometric authentication relies on human traits to establish identity, and that choice brings a distinct mix of strengths, limitations, and risks that differ from knowledge or possession factors.
Unlike passwords or tokens, biometric traits are inherent to the person, which makes them attractive for convenience and speed in everyday use. At the same time, those traits are deeply personal and difficult to replace, which raises the stakes when something goes wrong. From a security perspective, biometrics shift the problem from protecting a secret to managing measurement, matching, and privacy responsibly. To use biometrics well, you have to understand not only how they work technically, but also how they behave under real conditions, adversarial pressure, and long-term operational use.
Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to the CISS books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series.
Biometric types vary widely, and each relies on different physical or behavioral characteristics with different reliability profiles. Common examples include fingerprint patterns, facial recognition based on geometric and texture features, iris patterns formed by the eye, and voice characteristics shaped by anatomy and speech habits. Each modality has strengths in certain environments and weaknesses in others, which means there is no universally superior biometric.
Fingerprints can be fast and familiar, but may struggle with worn skin or contamination, while face recognition is contactless, but sensitive to lighting and pose.
Iris recognition can be highly distinctive, but requires specialized sensors and user cooperation, and voice patterns can enable remote use, but are affected by noise and illness. Choosing a biometric type is therefore a risk and usability decision, not merely a technology preference.
Enrollment is the process where a biometric system captures reference data, and it is important to understand that systems typically store templates rather than raw images or recordings. A template is a mathematical representation of distinctive features extracted from the biometric sample, designed to support comparison without retaining the original artifact. This reduces some risk, but it does not eliminate sensitivity, because templates can still be abused if exposed. Enrollment quality matters greatly because poor initial capture leads to unreliable matching later, regardless of how advanced the matching algorithm is. Environmental conditions, user cooperation, and sensor calibration during enrollment all influence long-term performance. A rushed or careless enrollment process can permanently degrade the effectiveness of the biometric for that user. Matching is where biometric systems compare a live sample to the stored template, and this comparison relies on thresholds rather than exact matches. Because biometric measurements vary naturally, systems must decide how close is close enough, which introduces the concepts of false accept and false reject outcomes. A false accept occurs when an unauthorized person is incorrectly accepted, while a false reject occurs when an authorized person is incorrectly denied. Adjusting thresholds changes the balance between security and usability, tightening acceptance to reduce false accepts at the cost of more false rejects, or loosening acceptance to improve convenience while increasing risk. There is no perfect threshold that eliminates both errors, which means every deployment involves trade-offs. Understanding those trade-offs is essential when deciding where biometrics are appropriate. Accuracy in biometric systems depends on sensor quality, environmental conditions, and population characteristics, not just on algorithms. A high-quality sensor can capture more consistent data, reducing noise that leads to mismatches. Environmental factors such as lighting, humidity, background noise, or physical obstructions can significantly affect capture quality, especially for face and voice modalities. Population characteristics also matter, because systems trained or tuned on one demographic may perform differently on another, leading to uneven error rates. These factors mean that laboratory performance metrics rarely translate perfectly into operational reality. A realistic assessment of accuracy must consider where and how the biometric will actually be used. Liveness detection is a critical defense against spoofing, aiming to ensure that the biometric sample comes from a living person rather than a replica or recording. Techniques may include detecting depth and three-dimensional structure, analyzing subtle motion or changes over time, or sensing physiological signals such as pulse or blood flow. Liveness checks raise the cost of presentation attacks, but they also add complexity and can introduce new failure modes. Poorly implemented liveness detection can frustrate legitimate users or fail under certain conditions, such as low light or limited mobility. Attackers also adapt, developing more sophisticated spoofs that attempt to mimic liveness cues. As a result, liveness detection should be viewed as a necessary but not sufficient control, layered with other protections.
Template protection is especially important because biometric traits cannot be changed easily if compromised.
Unlike a password that can be reset, a fingerprint or iris pattern is effectively permanent for the individual.
If a template is stolen or misused, the long-term impact can extend beyond a single system or organization.
Strong protection measures include encryption, secure storage, and limiting where and how templates are processed.
Some designs also incorporate techniques that make templates unusable outside a specific system context, reducing cross-system abuse.
Treating biometric templates as high-value secrets is essential, even though they are not secrets in the traditional sense.
Privacy concerns are central to biometric authentication because biometric data is sensitive personal information tied directly to an individual's body or behavior. Collection and use of biometrics can feel intrusive, especially if users are not fully informed about how their data is stored, used, and retained. There is also concern about function creep, where biometric data collected for authentication is later repurposed for tracking or surveillance. Transparency, consent, and purpose limitation are therefore important principles when deploying biometrics. From a security standpoint, privacy failures undermine trust and can create legal and reputational risk that outweighs any convenience benefit. Responsible biometric use requires treating privacy as a design constraint, not an afterthought. Storage architecture plays a major role in biometric risk, with common options including on-device secure enclaves and centralized repositories. On-device storage keeps templates local, reducing exposure from large-scale breaches and limiting how far compromised data can spread. Centralized storage simplifies management and supports multi-device use, but it concentrates risk by creating a high-value target. The choice affects not only security, but also recovery and revocation strategies, because removing or updating templates is easier in centralized models. Hybrid approaches attempt to balance these concerns, but add architectural complexity. Evaluating storage options requires considering threat models, scale, and the acceptable impact of compromise.
Presentation attacks are a persistent threat, involving attempts to fool biometric systems using molds, photographs, recordings, or increasingly sophisticated synthetic artifacts.
Fingerprint systems may be targeted with artificial fingers, face systems with high-quality images or masks, and voice systems with recorded or generated speech. These attacks exploit the fact that sensors ultimately measure signals, not intent. Defense relies on liveness detection, sensor improvements, and contextual checks that make spoofing harder to scale.
However, no biometric modality is immune,
and attackers tend to focus on the weakest deployed systems rather than the strongest theoretical designs. Recognizing that presentation attacks are practical, not hypothetical, is key to realistic risk assessment.
Biometric authentication is often most effective when used as one factor paired with another factor rather than as a standalone control. Combining biometrics with a possession or knowledge factor mitigates the risk of false accepts and reduces the impact of biometric compromise. In such designs, the biometric can provide convenience and quick verification, while the second factor provides a recoverable and revocable layer of security. This pairing also helps address spoofing concerns because an attacker must defeat multiple independent controls. Many successful deployments use biometrics to unlock or activate another authenticator rather than to serve as the sole gate. This layered approach aligns well with broader multi-factor authentication strategies.
Operational challenges can complicate biometric use, including accessibility issues, injuries, and changes in physical traits over time. Some users may be unable to provide certain biometrics due to disabilities, temporary injuries, or occupational wear.
Physical characteristics can also change because of aging, medical procedures, or environmental exposure, affecting matching reliability. Systems must accommodate these realities without forcing users into insecure fallback methods that negate the intended benefit.
Providing alternative authentication paths and clear exception handling is part of responsible deployment.
Ignoring operational variability leads to brittle systems that fail users when conditions deviate from the ideal.
Regulatory and legal requirements often govern the collection, storage, and retention of biometric data, adding another layer of obligation beyond technical security. Laws and regulations may define consent requirements, limit retention periods, or impose strict safeguards for biometric information. Non-compliance can result in significant penalties and can force abrupt changes to systems if requirements are misunderstood. From a governance perspective, biometric deployments should be reviewed not only by security teams, but also by legal and privacy stakeholders. This ensures that technical design aligns with external obligations and internal risk tolerance. Compliance considerations reinforce the need for disciplined data handling and clear documentation. Biometric authentication offers clear convenience benefits and can improve user experience, but it introduces unique risks that must be managed deliberately. Accuracy depends on sensors, environment, and population, while matching thresholds require careful balancing of security and usability. Spoofing threats and the permanence of biometric traits make template protection and liveness detection essential rather than optional. Privacy and regulatory concerns demand transparency, minimization, and strong governance over biometric data. When biometrics are paired with other factors and deployed with realistic expectations, they can strengthen authentication without becoming a single point of failure. Used carelessly, they can create irreversible problems that outlast any short-term gain in convenience. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.